All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to our PatternFly demo today. I put the agenda in the chat, and we're gonna go ahead and get started with. There's Matt. We'll go ahead and get started with interaction design. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to Matt Carano for lists and tables design docs, toolbar with filters for design docs as well.
Okay, let me share out my screen. Okay, everybody seeing my screen?
Yes.
Let me see. Yeah, so one of two things I've been working on that are fairly related. This design doc for displaying data and lists and tables is still a work in progress. But the intent here is to really talk about when to use lists, when to use tables. With PatternFly 4, we are shifting our story a little bit where as I think you know by now if you've been following the project, we're creating a data tables design that has a lot of the visual advantages of lists in PatternFly 3. So this document tries to address that topic. When should you use a list and when should you use a table, and some of the optional styling, using compact styling versus standard styling for tables. So that's available in Google Doc form at this point, and there's still some work here to do in terms of updating some of the mock-ups to match the most recent designs. The other thing that I wanted to just highlight briefly, and Gina is actually going to present the visual work on this, so I won't get too much into the design itself, but I've been spending a lot of time on trying to clarify our story for the data toolbar and filtering. So we've defined a number of variations of a toolbar that go from the simple case to more complex toolbars, and also considering what that toolbar will look like on a mobile device. And again, Gina is going to go through the high fidelity mockups, so I won't spend too much time here. But also trying to clarify our story on filtering, the different types of filters that we, filter components that we may need in PatternFly 4, and really emphasizing the idea that there's no one-size-fits-all solution for filtering, but that products may need to look at their requirements and to construct the filters that they need from a variety of components that are available in PatternFly. A lot of the custom select work we're doing now will feed directly into our filter story, and you'll see this custom filter example down at the bottom really emphasizes the fact that filters can be built easily from by combining, in this case, combining 3 select lists and a date picker. So for PatternFly 4, I think the messages were with both the toolbar and filtering, we're trying to move towards a much more flexible solution, a solution where we can put together various combinations of components to meet the needs of applications adopting PatternFly. Any questions anybody has? Okay, and again, these documents are linked in the agenda. Feel free to go in, review these, and provide any comments directly in the document. Thank you.
Thank you. And that bridges us to visuals for Gina with Toolbar.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to start sharing my screen. The Envision project that I'm going to share is also linked in that demo agenda. But this is going off of what Matt just explained with all the toolbar interaction designs that he shared. So we recently updated this. We added this filter icon for accessibility reasons, and as I continue down, each toolbar will become more complex. And like Matt explained, it's really flexible so that you can replace these or this icon specifically, the sort icon, with a different icon if you want to, and as well as the action buttons, we only allow for 2, and then if you want to add more, they can go under the kebab menu. So then filters here will show up underneath, and then the pagination, we added a newer style here for like the select. If you want to show more than just 10 items or however many items that you want to show per page, you can use that drop down. And this is like the newer menu that we added, as well as here it shows up. And then finally, the bulk selector is also a drop down that you can switch from select all, select none, or a different action there. I just put other action. And here for select some items, we added a new design here just for when there's some items selected from the list. So that will represent that. And here's the mobile toolbars, all based on that original toolbar design. And this is how it will expand if you were to select on the filter icon. And then I have some examples of the toolbar within an actual content selection. So this would be it with a list or data table, data list here with the pagination on the bottom as well, and cards. And then finally the mobile view where the pagination also shows up on the bottom. And then that would be it opened. We made this important decision here that we didn't want to push the content down, so we're just overlaying that on top of the content. And that's all. Anybody have any questions? Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. And just a reminder to go ahead and mute your mics if those happen to be on, and maybe you didn't notice. Okay, and then Michael Solidonia on dashboards.
Yep. So I'm going to go over our new direction for dashboards, a later approach. So just to give some insight on kind of our initially planned direction for dashboards, we were essentially going with the idea that any kind of graphical data, any like data visualizations or charts, which you typically see in dashboards, would be kind of in this dark theme. We thought this was going to be a nice use of our overlay system and the image treatment system that we devised, kind of expanding on that. And initially it worked out pretty well. Like you can see here, we were basically just coming up with these fake dashboards that weren't using real content, and so we were able to pick charts and things that worked well for the layouts, and it was kind of ideal situations, so it's no wonder that it worked out. But once we started trying to apply it to actual products, you might have seen this in the earlier presentation, and this is Insights, it got to be a little bit more difficult, and we started running into a lot of problems that needed to be solved on more of a case-by-case basis rather than a more systematic approach. And a large reason for that was because of the kind of darker approach we were taking. So in this case, it's like you can see some of those columns or some of those kind of cards, if you will, kind of start to disappear in the background. And it's like, how do you approach that from a systematic level? Because that kind of depends on the brightness of the background image. and all this stuff. And then I think they did a pretty good job, solving those problems. But like I said, they're not really systematic solutions. They're case by case solutions, which we just can't do that for every product. So we decided to, and then also here, even I've been working on this for a while, and even with coming up with like the most ideal charts and the most ideal data, still kind of struggled with getting the hierarchy right and getting a system that I felt was scalable and flexible enough to where you could really flow in any types of data. It just kind of wasn't happening. So I think it was Tao, a designer, was working on some dashboards for his product, and he sent us these screens that looked a lot like this. And it was kind of a epiphany moment for us, where we kind of realized that light dashboards might actually be the solution to these problems. And then we were also getting a lot of feedback that people might just not like the dark theme. They might just want a light dashboard. So we wanted to come up with a solution that worked for everyone and was scalable, like I was saying before. And it really did kind of come down to switching to this kind of lighter theme that uses cards that are like really well defined and really scalable, and really flexible, to kind of solve those problems. So like I said, Tao came to us with screens that looked very similar to these. I actually just kind of copied them into this layout. And he had some light theme charts that were looking really great, and we decided to go with that. So in terms of converting, some dashboards I've done before, like this was an example of a dashboard I was working on here. You can see it converts really well to the light theme. But it's important to note that the dark theme isn't going away entirely. We still want to use the dark theme, but only in situations where we're kind of highlighting what would be kind of determined as the primary data set, I guess, or like kind of the featured data, if you will, just as a recommendation. So like if you want to use this dark theme, and if you do happen to have kind of an overview page or something that has this kind of featured data that you want to kind of highlight, then we could recommend this alternate styling for that specific data. But it's not going to be on every page of the dashboard, and it's not going to be a full screen thing like it was before. It's really only kind of this specific use case. It's a much more defined use case of using the dark theme to highlight featured data, like I've been saying. So I think that's a much better approach. It's a lot more systematic, like I was saying. It's a lot more clearly defined. It's a lot easier to realize when you should use the dark theme now versus when you should not. And it kind of tones it back a little bit, but in a really tasteful way that I think will lead to better dashboards overall. That's it.
Hey,
Thank you very
Michael,
much.
just one question I had. So I know
Yep.
you talked about the difficulties of kind of constructing a systematic approach to this. And I'm wondering, I know with PatternFly 3, we tried to have sort of a system of sort of predefined cards with different charts and different patterns in it. And that was always challenging because dashboards become so application specific.
Mhm.
So I think, and maybe this is, I know you, Rachel, has also been working with you on this. What type of advice are we going to be able to give to designers in terms of being able to construct usable dashboards without being overly prescriptive about?
Right. I think what you said at the end there is key, not being overly prescriptive. But I think the rule kind of we defined where maybe if you have that featured content using the dark theme versus the light theme for everything else is kind of a start.
Yes.
But it's a good question. Like we don't want to be overly prescriptive, but we do want to be able to give some kind of guidance there. So I think starting with the cards, I think we still have more work to do there in terms of defining those recommendations. But I think starting with this kind of card system and maybe coming up with some kind of grid or column system that we can utilize to where we can kind of recommend like an open canvas that you can then flow the different cards with different charts into. I think that'll help a lot.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we've taken the requirements from different teams into consideration on how to surface that within the design as well. So if there's a product specific question or using a dashboard, hopefully that is something we can surface within the design on the site, so you can have some visual clue about how to go about designing for that in your own product.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. And for accessibility, Michael Spaxman with workspace adjustments and title enhancement.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. You should be able to see my screen. So we worked on a few things. It kind of all started with making some tweaks to the alternate text for the brand component here in the top left section. Basically, it had alt text, but it just said something along the lines of, brand logo, and we wanted that to align with what the workspace looks like in core. So it actually has, like the product name logo. So small but impactful change. Then we started looking more in this kind of top left-hand area of the workspace. And the next kind of big thing that jumped out to us was that this component search was rather incomplete. It was really just an input, and we were relying on placeholder text to kind of guide, visually impaired users, which has kind of shoddy support across the various screen readers. So we basically just turned it into a proper React form. We used the PatternFly React form components, and now it has a nice label. And some better placeholder text. That's a little more descriptive of what you can do and kind of better guides the users through that experience of searching for components. So then moving on, we took a look at this navigation, and one thing jumped out. So we recently added these tags here that really kind of relate packages to these nav items, whether it's components or demos or what. But basically, the problem was if you can't see and you're using a screen reader, these links here, for example, area chart and charts, they're both just links, and they weren't related to one another in any way, but they are related. So if I just look at the markup here, there's the list item, and then we've got two links in here. And so if you were just looking through like a list of links, you would hear area chart, and that's a link. And then separately, you would hear charts, and that's a link. And there was really no way of understanding how are they related. So it ended up being a simple but impactful fix. So basically, just using aria described by for the link, and then pointing that to the relevant tag, for the package. So now you would hear something along the lines of, area chart found in PatternFly charts. So this is just, a nice way of kind of making sure people understand context. There was nothing wrong with the implementation. It was just a context thing. So then for the title enhancements, and we were just looking at kind of the fixed version of all this. I didn't have time to put together a nice deck or anything. But for the title enhancements, so we can just notice here that there's a couple of headings here in a row. And previously, these were all top level headings. They were basically H1, H1, H1. So for us, for sighted users, it's not too difficult to understand kind of the page hierarchy. Obviously this is page layout demos page. There's an examples section, and then there's various examples. So they're all using the title, capital T title component under the hood, and previously it was just assuming H1 across the board. So if you take the cited experience away for a second, and you just think about the fact that there was basically top level heading, and then as many top level headings as there are examples, there's really no hierarchy that makes any sense. So while we're still missing some bodies of text below these various headings, at least now you have the ability to pass in the heading level when you use the title component. So we've got kind of this top level heading of page layout demos. Then we've got a subheading for examples, and then further subheadings for each of the individual examples. So this will just give us some more flexibility, allow people to put together the information architecture that they need to have in their consuming application. And that is it. If anyone has questions, I can take those now. Otherwise, we can return it back.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And for CSS, Christy with compound expansion and table in modal migration doc.
Rachel. So this week, one of the things I worked on is the modal migration examples. So this is what we have in PatternFly 3, and this is the example we have in PatternFly 4. Pretty straightforward. They both share pretty much the similar classes. So both have a header and a title, both have a close button, a body, and a footer. And you can see the comparisons between the classes at the bottom in the documentation. One thing to note is the work that Coca and I have been doing with updating CSS variables is that we'll be updating the button positioning here and this header size to match the designs that we currently have in the sketch file. So that's it for the modal upgrade. And then for compound expansion in the table, so this will be an example added to the current table component, and it will just be at the very bottom. So basically this table acts as similar to the expandable table that we have here. This one expands using this drop down arrow here. That's how you expand the second row. But in this case, you would expand this second row using the button link here. So when you click on that and it's active or focused, it styles its border similar to what we have in tabs. And then it will expand this row. So this is a body, this is the table body, and this is the table body. And then this is a table row with a piece of table data in it, and the table data expands all of the columns. And then this is a nested table inside. So table within a table, and then this table matches similar to what we have the compact table here. It just has a few different styling updates. And then mobile view looks like this. So that's that first row here. Branches is currently expanded, so it has this underline. And then this is the nested table. That's how it looks. It just has more padding on its x-axis. And then these are the other table bodies or table rows inside of those table bodies that exist in the table there. And this entire table body that's expanded has this blue border on the left. And basically, if I was to click on pull requests, the underline would shift there, and then the data here would populate from pull requests. And there's a few styling changes still to be made because I'm going to be working with Matt Nolting on readjusting some of the CSS we have in tables in general because it's getting quite complex. But yeah, that's all from me.
All right, any questions here? Okay, Sarah on custom select and variations.
Okay, can you hear me okay? I'm having
Yes,
trouble.
can.
Okay, having trouble with my webcam today, so I apologize for not looking at you. So I have the select component, the custom select, which currently exists in the drop-down component, but it's really its own beast. So there are actually 4 variations that I have. There's the just single select, which you can see here. It would allow the user to pick one thing, and then that selection goes into the toggle at the top. The second version is including a type ahead. So in this case, there's a text field in the toggle, and when you the user would be able to filter the drop-down items based on that. And please ignore the yellow here. That's a little bit of code from the workspace leaking in. Then the third example is a multi-select that also includes a type ahead. So in this case, the user would be able to start typing, or they could pick from the dropdown. They can pick multiple things, and those come in as chips. So the toggle gets pretty complex because it's got chips, it's got the dropdown. You add in a clear button, and then there's the caret to expand and collapse. This shows a variant where the chips are collapsed, so there's a limit to how many it will show, and then you get the little button that says 2 more, and then you would go back to this where they're all there, and they all actually wrap. Also, so first the text box will wrap. Actually, I can use this, and then the chips also wrap with the text box in line with it. And then the fourth version is the Checkbox Select. This is a little bit different, where the items in the dropdown have checkboxes. The user can select multiples, and instead of using chips, we put a badge in there to show how many are selected. And this also has the possibility of adding in groups. So there's a title for each that you can put for each group, and then they're divided into sections. I think that's everything. This is almost ready to go into PR. Just a couple little nits.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Any questions on this? Okay. And James, with new migration examples.
Hey, so I am working on the migration example docs for the past few weeks now to leverage the transition between PF3 to PF4. It's a work in progress with a lot of other different various components, but I mainly focused on the login and the popover. So I'm going to share my screen right now. So this is the login migration from PatternFly 3. This has no social media login component in this example. This will actually be added later on for the actual main login component. And right below it is actually the PatternFly 4 login. So this is just a comparison between the two. We have a body of code to show the class usage between PF3 and PF4. As you can see, they're semi-responsive. Well, now the other migration doc that I worked on is the popover migration. There are various different popovers that point left, right, top, bottom, but we're just using one example, pointing towards the left. So this is a PatternFly 3 popover, and this is a PatternFly 4 popover. And again, on the bottom is the PF3 to PF4 class comparison. About it. Anyone have any questions? No. And back to you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Okay, Michael Coker on create login component and login error state, as well as our empty state.
Hey, yeah, let me share my screen. Yeah, so I'll start with the login component. We already had this layout. It was a demo, and it was a combination of a login layout and then a login box component for this white area. And since we needed a little more control over the login page that we're creating here, and we deliver this as a single page that's not like super flexible. We just decided to make this into a single component so we can have control over everything that's inside of it. And so basically, this was just converting what we already had as a demo and a combination of a layout and a component into a single component. And that allowed us, really, it's a one-to-one match for the most part, except it allowed us to simplify the markup just a little bit because we're using a consolidated set of code instead of two different conceptual sets of code to build it. So that's basically it. You've probably already seen this if you've seen the login demo, nothing new there. And then we also didn't have an error state for the login page, and so I created that. This is one variation for the moment, and basically you can just see this, that we have error states indicated for username and password and room for an error message with accessibility attributes applied so that you know that these are invalid for non-sighted users. That's basically it for the login component changes. And then on top of that, just a new component to create an empty state component in PatternFly 4. It mimics the PatternFly 3 empty state component for the most part. You have room for an icon, a title, body, primary action, and then secondary action. And that we just have one secondary action here as a button. That's basically it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions here? All right, headed down to React. We have Dawn on TypeScript conversion for PF4.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the sprint was more work on TypeScript, and we actually got it into master now. So we have one example right now with TypeScript. It's the avatar. We went back and took this one since it was one that was less complicated. And as you can see in here, we're now using interface that we pass in instead of prop types. Files will be called TSX files, and the tests are also written in TSX files. To get this to work, we actually had to use Babel 7 and React Core only. So the rest of the other folders do not have it in there. And the Jest stuff is for testing is still being run using the TypeScript compiler instead of the Babel transpiler. So that's one difference. So we have a few issues that we're still working through that we've created. One of them's that is so that we don't have to we don't have the issues with some of the issues that we have with running it through the TypeScript transpiler. And then another one is, if you notice, we still have prop types in here, and that's for the Jest test. Right now we just need to leave them in here, even though we have a plugin that actually converts them. Once we get this issue solved, this should be removed, and you won't need these anymore. You'll just need the default props. And that's about it. I guess we should start converting each the components one by one slowly and see how things go. And as it's set up right now, you can still run JavaScript and TypeScript together. Is there any questions?
Will we eventually drop the JavaScript file extensions altogether?
Yeah, eventually we'll get rid of them altogether. Anything else? Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Don. And Yakum on React Workspace build and popover.
Yeah. How do I share? Let's see. Oh. Here, let's switch screen share. All right, can you see my Google Chrome here with PatternFly React open?
Yes, yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So Stacksman showed some nice accessibility updates earlier to the workspace. Thanks for that. And I guess just as a precursor to that, I had made some updates last sprint, which I just haven't had the chance yet to demo. So I'm just showing it right now real quick. So now if you look at our React documentation, workspace documentation, you can see that each of the component examples also has a sublisting of the various component props within it. So you can see, for example, that the breadcrumb examples page has actually three components with their props inside of it. So you can quickly navigate to just the props that you're interested in. And additionally, the filter is now aware of these props too. So previously, if you were searching for, let's say, kebab, it would not show up because it was only filtering on the example labels and not the component props within it. But now you can find, for example, kebab toggle props, or a search for breadcrumbs here. Clicking on any of these props will link you directly to that section, so it'll put it into view, and you can also bookmark that if you wanted to, and always come back to it. And lastly, just added the package name next to each example page, so you know that the breadcrumb is part of the core package, whereas the icons are part of the icons package, tokens part of the tokens package. This is useful because we have several different packages now in PatternFly 4, so this way the user knows which package they have to use in order to get that component or functionality. Moving over to some build explorations that I was doing. So I was looking into tying in semantic release to work in a monorepo setting. And the main motivation for this was to overcome some current shortcomings that we have with learner version and learner publish. So just doing some exploration there. And one of the nice things about semantic release I saw was it has the ability to leave comments in your pull requests. So in this example pull requests, I've made just some dummy changes to React Core, React Icons, and React Docs. And for each of those three packages, you can see that it published a new version, and it tells you which version it published under. So this way you can easily see where your latest changes will end up in. And to go along with that, another nice thing that semantic release can do is if you go to the releases, you can actually get a breakdown of all the changes that were included. So this package was released, and these are the changes in it. So that's something else that I thought was pretty nice. Finally, going back to PatternFly 4, I worked on the popover component that another contributor, Boaz, had worked on before. But it didn't include any positioning stuff, so it was just basically a div that was occupying space within a container. But now it's got popover functionality, so I can click on this popover, it shows up, and I have three examples right now. The top example shows it's just a little bit of code to use the popover. You just have to provide a header content, body content, and then some element to wrap it with, so that it knows what the popover is in reference to. So this shows some default behaviors here. Clicking on the toggle opens up the popover. If I click on that button again, it closes it. But there's actually several ways to close it. You can also close it by hitting the X in the upper right. Or by default, you can close the popover by clicking outside of the popover. So just clicking up here would close it. The next example shows a couple more of these usages in detail. So actually right now, you can turn off the outside click, the hide on outside click behavior. So right now it hides it. But if I disable this, now if I click outside, it's not closing it automatically. It's showing off some of the positioning, top, bottom, left, right. And one additional feature that I was looking into was possibly keeping the popover in view if they scroll down. So right now, if they scroll down and try to keep it in view. But it's kind of experimental. So this pull request is still open, and I'm still waiting for, I just opened it yesterday, so I'm still waiting for comments on some of these features, if they're desired or not. But that can also be turned off. So in that case, it would just go like this. And the behavior right now is that it would flip to the opposite side. So again, here, if I were to bring this window in, you can see that it flips it over to the left side. And then just a quick example with a headless popover that existed before as well. And here's the long list of props. But really, there's only 3 of them that are required. Some kind of wrapping element so that the popover knows what it references to. Some body content to put in there, and the visible Boolean flag to open or close the popover. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Joachim. Any questions here? And any other questions for our demo presenters today? All right. Thank you, everybody who joined today, and I'll be sending this out on YouTube and over email, so be on the lookout. Thank you again for presenting.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.